Recording in progress.
Hey Mickey, how you doing?
Fantastic. God gave us another day.
How you doing? Okay.
So I think I had it all set up in my thing. But I'm sure.
Did you get a text today?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, then you're set up.
And then what I did was I went to the Zoom thing. And I downloaded that.
Okay.
And
So that Zoom is if you're not showing up in person, you'd actually do it online. So like right now we got Lisa on here, right?
I don't know.
Yes.
Yep.
Hi.
Hi Lisa.
We don't see you.
That's okay. We don't have to. It's all right.
You don't want to. That's okay.
You wouldn't see me either.
Well, sorry, we got a little late start today because I had we had a deanery meeting, so I just got back from that. So we're starting recording now. So welcome to Bob the Father. This is boy, we've had one a week now for over a year it seems. So this is maybe the 58th or 59th.
We ain't bothering you.
Works out. So again, these are really just designed for open questions. It's really more of a open forum. If there's a question I don't know, I'll try to find out and get an answer before the next week. So it's really up to whoever's here to kind of direct it. So who has a question?
I couldn't believe what you said this morning about the host. I was in total shock.
Yeah, as someone came to the door yesterday and apparently had a host. They said they found it in the pew, and I found a few hosts. Now I don't know if they're consecrated or not, but you always assume they are. And I know I've heard things in the past where sometimes people would find them in the pews or in the songbooks, and I know usually when I'm distributing communion, I tend to keep an eye like out the corner of my eye to see if anyone makes a move to their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually, if that's the indication, I'm assuming they consume. I have had to stop a few people and be like, hey, are you know, that's why I think it's important for people to understand that when you receive the Eucharist, it's important for the minister to see you receive it.
Mm-hmm. Because
some people might do this, they may take, which is not necessarily proper, but they may take a host back like maybe their spouse who's in the pew, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe take the host
Aren't you
and
supposed to have one of those
picks.
things?
Yeah, you're supposed to have picks. Or the other option is we could come bring it to that person. I mean, we have a whole section where, at least here in St. Gabriel, where people who can't necessarily move are very mobile, we'll bring them the Eucharist.
Mm-hmm.
And so we encourage people to sit in that spot if they can't, get up and come up there. But even if they don't, all they have to do is let us know. It's like, hey, I got my spouse or my whatever can't get up there. Can you come back and give it to them? Sure, that's not a problem. No one's going to say no to that.
Well, see, I like getting it in my mouth.
Sure.
And I always did until this crap started.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's the other thing too. Like even now, you notice when I serve communion, I have a little purificator that has some hand sanitizer. So if someone does receive on the tongue, I put on the tongue and I rub my fingers on the purificator. So if you want to receive on the tongue, I'm not against that. I don't think
thank you. Because I just hate to put it in my hand.
Sure.
I'm old-fashioned.
It's a matter of preference. Some people say they like in the hand, other people prefer the tongue, and that's okay. The USCCB says either way it works. So if people want to receive the tongue, that shouldn't be an issue. But yeah, I think the fact that we find these hosts around is kind of concerning because, I mean, I've heard that some people when they maybe have a guest come who's not Catholic, they may it's kind of I've been in that situation before too. When I was in college, some of my fraternity brothers who weren't Catholic, they were kind of interested and they wanted to see what it was all about, and so I brought them to Mass. And I remember I had one of my fraternity brothers told him like, you shouldn't receive the Eucharist. He's like, well, why not? I'm like, well, are you Catholic? He's like, well, yeah. I'm like, well, okay. I mean, so if you are, okay, but I don't know if he really knew what that meant as far as the catechesis and the faith, because I know he was baptized, but he wasn't like a practicing
Practicing,
Catholic
yes.
or wasn't confirmed. I don't even ever received his first Eucharist. So I would kind of like warn him, was like, well, you really shouldn't unless you're, actually a Catholic. But he went up and received. And how he actually consumed it, okay. And I always kind of look back on that as like, well, if you look at the circumstances to receive the Eucharist, obviously you have to be baptized. You have to believe what the church believes about the Eucharist, which some of our Protestant brothers and sister believes is more like a symbol than actually the presence of Jesus.
Well, that's what I heard.
Issue.
Some people I talked to, they would say, your religion is a symbol. I said, no, it's not. You are receiving the body and blood of Christ.
And we found over time, with dialogue, is that a lot of our Protestant brothers just actually do believe in the real presence. But then the question comes down to, okay, well, how does that happen? So I think some of our brothers and sisters, like let's say maybe in the Anglican or the Lutheran faith, would say, ordination is not a thing. You don't need to be ordained. Your common priesthood allows you to bring the Eucharist about. And I think our Catholic response to that is, well, then what was the whole point of the Last Supper?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Jesus didn't bring everybody into that meal. He could have brought more, but he brought just those 12. And so what does that mean, not only scripturally, but also theologically? And I think we have to conclude that, well, Jesus was ordaining his 12 disciples as the first bishops. I think we have to hold that. And in the early church, it was evident that the apostolic succession was very, very important. It wasn't reduced until the 16th century. So for 15 centuries, everyone understood that ordination was very important and that the apostolic succession was a thing. And it was only until Zwingli and Calvin and Luther that it was decided that wasn't really necessary. So that's kind of where maybe our divisions lie. And then, of course, in a state of grace. And obviously that's more of an issue of conscience than it would be an objective, partially because we understand that there's mortal sin and venial sin. And maybe our Protestant brothers and sisters wouldn't necessarily recognize that, if they even recognize sin at all.
They don't recognize confession.
Well, that's the thing. And so a lot of our brothers and sisters of other faiths, with a few exceptions, would probably say that, confession, just the fact that Jesus died for my sins are forgiven. It would say, well, yeah, that's true, but that grace is given through a particular way that you actually have to act with it. And it's not, and they may say, well, yeah, I do that when I pray and I offer my sins to Jesus. Okay, we could, there could be grace given in that, but it's not the same sacramental grace as given in the sacrament. That contrition is necessary, but there's an act of the church involved, the act of Jesus himself, of absolving us of our sins, that you don't get in personal prayer. And so that's when we might start dividing in a way, right? And so that's why my fraternity brothers should not have received the Eucharist. Now, he may not have understood that.
So they were just in college with you.
Right. And so I should have probably done a better job of explaining that, but also like when you're there at Mass and you're about ready to go up and it's like, you probably shouldn't, and they say, well, I'm going to. Well, there's not much you can really do at that point. Even if I tried to explain these things to them.
Even if you tripped them.
I'm pretty sure he probably would have been, I'm still going to receive. Okay, fine.
So were you in your smock here? When you were
No, I'm talking, this was when I was in, so I was only ordained 3 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Right, so I was an engineer at Rolla. I was studying engineering at Rolla, and I was in a fraternity there. And that's when I was back in my early 20s.
So then you decided to be a priest?
Well, that happened about 10 years later.
Really?
Well, yeah, I mean, it wasn't until I was maybe 30 when I started rediscerning the priesthood.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so I mean, it was, when I was in Rolla, I was pretty sure I wasn't being called to be, the priesthood was kind of something that, I was certain when I was younger, but at this point it was like, that's probably
So you
done.
went back and forth?
I wouldn't even say that. I think when I was about 20, all the way to the point where I was about maybe 29, 30, priesthood was not on my radar at all. I was looking for a girlfriend, I was looking for a family, and the priesthood was something I was pretty certain that was not being called to do. Now, of course, that discernment re-engaged through obviously act of the Holy Spirit and other particular people who are working with that grace. Yeah, so that kind of, you know, and I've talked about that before in other sessions, so that's out there in some other videos. So I don't get into the whole aspect of that. But yeah, so I mean, but even looking back at that, it was kind of like I could have done more to be like, hey, you know what, you really shouldn't, or like I could, but I think we all try to bring people to Mass, which is good, and especially people who are not Catholic, they may not understand, and so. A lot of that is, I've had to stop people in line because I've been like, are you Catholic? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, well, can I have Jesus back, right? And in some instances, that's actually, people have gotten some offended by it.
Oh, I bet they did.
Yeah. But also, we have to understand that this is not just a symbolic action recalling the Last Supper. This is actually receiving Jesus. And really, if you don't have that understanding, it's actually leading to your destruction. I mean, we're very clear in the Scripture, that's what Paul says, that you know, those of us who are not in a state to receive it, it's actually, we're eating our own death. We're eating our own destruction. Mm-hmm. Which even Catholics should understand that, that's kind of why we made the statement this morning, is like, even Catholics should understand that if you're not in a state to receive, you shouldn't. You should come to Mass. That's awesome that you come to Mass, and there's no problem with doing that. But there's no obligation every Sunday Mass to receive the Eucharist. Mm-hmm. The obligation is to come to Mass. And you should receive at least once a year. But that's it, right? Mm-hmm. And so Catholics need to understand, we do a better job of that, I think, too, to recognize that not every Mass we have to actually receive the Eucharist. And if we're not in a state to receive it, we definitely shouldn't. I know that when that really came, it's interesting, though, I think, how cultural that is, too, because before I left my former life to come to the seminary, I was going to daily Mass, and one of the Mass I attended, because it was the only Mass I could attend, was on the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe at my parish church when I was living in South Carolina. And what was so fascinating was you had this church was packed. It probably fit easily maybe 1,000 people, and there was probably about 1,200 there.
Wow.
At this, so and they're all Hispanic people, mm-hmm. right? Except for me and maybe 2 other people, I don't know. But when we came from time for communion, it was myself and maybe 4 other people went up to receive the Eucharist.
Wow.
Right. And it was kind of shocking because I had to kind of climb over people to get out into the aisle to go, and they were then also had to climb to get back, and I felt kind of awkward, but also it's like, well, I'm going to receive Jesus. I'm here. But no one else did.
Wow.
And I talked to the priest afterwards. I was like, Father, I don't know if I did something wrong, but I just noticed no one else came to receive the Eucharist. He's like, oh yeah, that's because none of them went to confession, probably this week or in the last maybe a couple weeks. I was like, oh. And it was kind of convicting because you start thinking, well, should I have then even gone up? I mean, because that's how serious that the people that were there took it. Mm-hmm. That they recognized, well, I haven't confessed in a while, so I shouldn't go up to receive the Eucharist. And I don't think we see that really too much in Anglo culture, white culture.
You see it at St. Francis de Sales.
You do? Well, yeah, but even then, yeah.
A line every Sunday, 2 lines.
For confession, right.
For just confession.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know the cathedral has the same thing, and but that's what I'm saying. I think that's there's kind of a lack of that understanding, I think, in some aspect. And I think that just shows we have to do a better job of catechesis and having people understand what we're actually doing.
Well, today I was talking to a girl that's Catholic, more friends, and she says, I told her I like to go to confession. She says, why?
Yeah.
She says, you can't be doing that many sins. And I says, wait, it's a sacrament.
Right.
I says, you receive grace. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I think obviously we have to understand that the sacrament of confession is there. You should go if you committed a mortal sin, of course. Mm-hmm. But even venial sins is good to go because you receive grace. The other thing I think people understand, a lot we talk about the tenets of the faith, like the tenets of Catholicism, and so I don't think many people know what those are. We have the divine law and we have ecclesiastical law, and this is an aspect of ecclesiastical law that kind of flows from that divine law. And part of that is, you should go to confession once a year, right? And to the point where actually you'd be culpable to the point of a grave matter if you didn't willfully, right? So You have a question on that? Yeah.
No, I was with you saying that just before about going to confession. I just remember, or maybe I misunderstood you saying that. I just believe that the people that do come to confession then believe that these are mortal sins. And I'm like, gee, I've never looked at it that way.
Yeah,
And that's why I was like,
yeah, because I know as that's one of the things interesting as a confessor is that the subjectiveness of sin. That when someone confesses, I don't know if it's a mortal sin or not. And so it's funny because sometimes you get questioned every so often. It's like, is that a mortal sin? I'm like, well, did you know it was wrong? Yeah. Did you do it anyway? Yeah. Well then, yes. I know. That's what I'm saying, right? I mean, so yeah, when people confess, I'm assuming they are mortal sin for them, right? Which is also going to be somewhat convicting, right? Because then you start thinking about your own sins, like, oh man, maybe I should confess that more. But also, I think it's important that that's one of the tenets of the church is that to go to confession once a year is something that's good to do. Even if it is venial stuff, that's still good because you're preparing yourself to receive Jesus in a deeper way. The whole thing about not eating meat on Fridays of Lent, that is a tenet of the faith. That there is the penalty of mortal sin, that if you do that willfully. And again, this all comes down to willfully, right? Is that maybe you can't get a confession for New Year's Eve it was only, you couldn't do it. Okay, well, hey, you know what? The intention was there, fine. Could you have gone earlier, maybe, but whatever, right? So, so even eating meat on Fridays of Lent, that still has the penalty of mortal sin if you do it willfully, right?
now, is it the same though throughout the year, really, because it was never really lifted and it was only to be replaced by something
the tenet of the church does not say every Friday. What the documents from Vatican II state is that you can do other forms of penance on Friday to reduce or to overcome that particular issue of eating meat on Friday. So in other words, if you don't do any other penance on Friday, and that can be literally anything, right? I mean, it could be, well, you know what, I'm going to maybe turn off the radio for 30 seconds in the car.
But who really knows this? That makes sense.
Yeah, well, see, that's what I'm saying, because part of this is also knowledge and are you willfully doing it? So if you don't have the knowledge, you can't willfully do it, right? So in some ways, ignorance is bliss. But I wouldn't be doing my job if I let people stay in ignorance, right? So obviously that's what we're trying to do. So these tenets of the faith are important, that they actually have the penalty of mortal sin. But a lot of people, like I said, a lot of people don't necessarily know that. And so is it a mortal sin? No. For them. If you don't willfully, if you willfully, do it, it also is a mortal sin. So I think it's important to recognize those things. And so back, when we talk about these things about finding the hosts, I can understand like people get nervous and like, I don't know what to do with it, and they just maybe put it in the soul or put it in the pew, fine. But
why couldn't they bring it back to you?
Well, see, I think that's the thing. It's because maybe at that point it becomes embarrassing.
Oh.
Right? Because someone who's maybe visiting doesn't really know what's going on. It's really the obligation of the people that bringing them to kind of, inform. But, obviously when you're up and you receive this, what you think is a piece of bread, and you're like, well, maybe I shouldn't. In some ways it's good you recognize maybe I shouldn't. But then it's like, what do I do? Well, someone will find it eventually. Okay?
Not all the time.
Right. And so, I only made the announcement, and I think I'm going to make the announcement on Sunday, because I'm not sure which Mass it's happening, but I know it's happening several times over the course of my tenure here. And it seems to be happening in certain places. So I think an announcement needs to be made probably at the Sunday Masses too.
I was going to say for you.
Can't they write it in the bulletin too?
Well, yeah, but there's no guarantee people are going to read the bulletin either.
Oh.
Yeah, that's very true.
Right.
I was going to say, kudos to you. Thank you for saying, and being a witness, saying, just to bring this forward.
Well,
it's very important.
As a priest, it pains me because, that's Jesus. And again, you could say, well, maybe it's not consecrated. Well, maybe it's not, but you'd have to assume it would be.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so the fact that there's and it's happening regularly kind of indicates, well, what's happening? What are we missing? What's happening here? Is it possible there's somebody that has some issue? maybe, and then the question would be how are we going to minister best to them, right? But I think it needs to be said. So that's why I made the announcement this morning, and I'm going to hopefully make these announcements we'll hopefully get everyone to make an announcement this weekend at Mass, at Sunday Masses. Because I imagine people are going to the daily Mass, it's probably not really them. I would hope it's not.
Well, I think everybody was shocked this morning.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think you knocked the socks off of
It's-
everybody.
No, I mean, having, come into church each week,
Mhm.
there were quite a few different evenings that I would find
Yeah.
consecrated host.
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
So, like I said, it's happened way too often to be a coincidence.
So it's more.
So, and like I said, I don't know if these are, maybe they're bringing it back to people and it's falling out their mouths. I don't know. I mean, but it's just something to be aware of. And so if we see it, we would definitely want to either come to the priest or even have that conversation like, hey, you really shouldn't do that, right? And even direct them to come talk to us. Just to make sure, that it's not being, desecrated. That's really what's happening here. And that's not good. For not only for Jesus' sake, but also for the sake of the person doing it.
Yeah.
So, so good. Great. Well, off to a good start so far. Any questions?
I have a question.
Great.
So when I was going through and finding old cards, I did find, and it didn't surprise me when you had mentioned that there were 3 cathedrals in St. Louis.
Well,
And-
three basilicas.
3 basilicas.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I saw it as cathedral, though. On the holy card that I had, it said cathedral.
Okay.
And I was like, wow. And I knew exactly because it was St. John the Evangelist.
Yes. Yeah.
So do you know when that happened?
When it was made a minor basilica?
Mm-hmm.
It was after the construction of the old cathedral and before the construction of the new
Okay,
cathedral.
that was why.
I'm guessing it was somewhere in the 1850s.
Is it still up?
Oh, so yeah, St. John Evangelist is still downtown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
around 20.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right there near the old,
Peter Plaza.
Near Council
Yeah,
Plaza
yeah.
or Council Tower.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's a minor basilica. So if you go in, you'll see. I think they have the Umbrellino, and then they have a chair for the Archbishop with his insignia on it. He's the only one to sit there. Same with the old cathedral, right? It's a basilica. It's
Yeah.
no longer a cathedral. They still have the chair, the Umbrellino. They don't have the Titanium, the bell. That's only at the cathedral. Down at the cathedral basilica, the new cathedral. So yeah, I think it's probably right. Is around because as the city was expanding, it was thought that basilica, the status of basilica, is granted that title due to its work in the community, particular ministry that they would have, and also the historical kind of importance. So that's kind of what would define a basilica. That would have a designation from Rome. And to be sure, I mean, every basilica would have the certificate with the Umbrellino and saying the date and who actually promulgated all it. So if you ever go down there, you could always look at it. Of course, they don't have daily masses down there anymore. They only have, I think, 1 mass or 2 masses every week.
Sunday.
Yeah, which is also interesting.
They used to have one every day.
Yes. I think 2. They usually have
Yeah.
the morning one and the noon.
But that's when there was a hotel that was nothing but ladies that lived there.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
So
yeah.
they had a big, and then the Park Plaza apartments that
Right.
they made, there was a lot of people that went through from there. So,
Right.
and they used to have the post office, the main
Yeah.
post office.
Well, I know a lot of people who work downtown would go there for the new mass. My dad was one of them. But yeah, it was. They obviously the population has decreased, but also the funny thing is that's actually the parish church for that boundary. So the old cathedral, Mary Queen of Victories, I think St. Joseph Croatian as well as St. John Nepomuk, all fall under that boundary.
Oh, okay.
But the parish church is actually St. John the Evangelist.
Really?
And I think it becomes the shrine too, if I'm not mistaken.
The Shrine of St. Joseph?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fascinating how many churches in that boundary, but they all have regular masses except for the actual parish. Well, whatever. I don't know, whatever. We'll see with this all things new if that changes. I don't know. I'll just see how that affects.
Well, the Shrine of St. Joseph, it's a miracle it's still here.
True, and
If
even
it
the shrines.
wasn't for Father Philippi,
Yeah.
you could forget it.
Well, even the shrine. I mean, they only have. I don't think they have. They don't have daily mass. I know they mass on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And then they have,
And
of course, weddings.
First Friday of every month.
Right. Yeah. Of course, on Feast of St. Joseph, that kind of stuff. But, yeah. So we'll see what happens with this new. What happens with all things new here? That just kicked off today. It's the new planning, strategic planning program. That'll be going on for the next couple of years. That's kind of the topic of our deanery meeting this afternoon. We had the Archbishop with us, so that's kind of nice, and he kind of gave us a little bit more insight. So yeah, I'll be interested to see how the landscape of the Archdiocese changes.
So they're going to take out a few churches.
There's no plan yet as far as what's going to happen, and so, but I mean, practically speaking, you look here in South City. It's funny, the Archbishop made this. We talked about this in one of our deanery meetings like a couple years ago, but he made the same comment that in South City and South City deaneries, there are 30,000 Catholics, and we have 26 priests serving those 30,000 Catholics. But if you look at St. Joe, Cottleville, and ICD, those two parishes alone, they have 30,000 Catholics and 6 priests serving all those Catholics.
Wow.
So obviously something's going to have to change as far as using our resources well. So what does that mean? Well, does that mean we're going to be closing churches? I don't know. Does that mean we're going to be consolidating parishes? I don't know. You could see maybe territories combining as they did in prior years. Like I know like Marion Jones, St. Boniface got folded into St. Stephen Protomartyr, which is kind of weird, but whatever. That they kind of did. Now St. Boniface turned into a theater.
God. I went to that church for years.
Yeah, I mean it was a pretty
and everybody loved it it was always packed.
Yeah.
And then one day it was sold.
It was pretty church.
But in the rectory too, it was gorgeous,
right.
and you got to go to mass there at 8 o'clock instead of going to the church.
Yeah.
It was so neat.
And I know St. Mary and Joe is still open, but that's being used more for like weddings, funerals by St. They're controlled by St. Stephen Protomartyr, like a chapel
like
or an oratory. So yeah, I mean, could that happen with other parishes? Sure. I really don't know you can maybe make practical opinions, but nothing's solidified at this point. So we'll see. I don't know.
St. John the Evangelist, they discontinued their 4:30 on Saturday as well as weekday, and there's just 10 a.m. on Sunday.
Yeah, I know they've kind of reduced their hours. So yeah, I don't know. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that. I mean, part of the struggle here in our deanery is that it also includes like places like the new cathedrals are part of our deanery, the old cathedral, all those downtown parishes. St. John the Evangelist, part of our deanery. How's it going to look, especially downtown, because we have so many historic churches that you can't just say, let's just sell them all off and close them. What you might want to happen is what kind of happened at St. Laborious, which was turned into a skate park, which is kind of interesting.
I still hear people complain about that.
Yeah, I mean,
they said they promised us if we gave them all our money that they would stay open.
Well,
if they 1 year after that, they closed it up on us.
It's weird because, like, obviously it's been deconsecrated and it's no longer a church, but the architecture and stuff is still all there, and it's kind of weird to see that happening in that kind of atmosphere and space.
That's what somebody else mentioned, one becoming a truck stop.
I don't know.
Swiss, I'll have to talk to her.
Okay. All right. Was that St. Laborious or something?
No, another one.
Okay. So I can't tell you what's happening. I'm just an associate pastor at St. Gabriel the Archangel. They don't that's really above my pay grade. I do know what they communicate, what they're doing, and I think this is maybe the difference, is they're really focusing on evangelization, how to best utilize the message being sent out in an efficient way, best utilizing our resources for that. But also they're planning over 380 listening sessions throughout the Archdiocese. So every parish will have 2.
That's gonna, you know what happened at St. George? I'm sure you've heard.
I know, yes.
And those people are still bitter.
I know.
And they feel
Well,
like they've been betrayed.
And I tell you what, Mickey, I think it'd be naive to think that people are not going to be, with whatever's decided,
Well,
people are going to be upset.
what I think they should have done was just done it. They shouldn't have had these meetings because people were getting furious at these meetings. I went to every one of them. That's my church, St. George.
Yeah.
And so I went to all these meetings, and I'm thinking, why don't you just do it and shut up?
Well, okay,
But-
I can tell you this. The reason that they're doing it is because it's actually practical and pastoral. Because what they're really, it's really true. From my impression, this is just Father Mark saying this. I think what they're trying to avoid is people saying, well, you never consult with us, you never return to us. They're taking away that argument.
Well, they say it's
Yeah.
still today. I mean, one lady comes to me all the time because she's so mad that they won't have one mass at St. Dominic's.
Right.
Which I don't know why they won't, because it sounds good to me. But she says they turned their back on us. They didn't listen to us. They just wanted us to talk and not do nothing. And I thought,
Yeah, and well, see, I think part of that too is it's an understanding that everyone's voice can be heard, but that doesn't mean that everyone is going to get what they want. And so part of the struggle, whether it be for a pastor or for an archbishop, is you got to do what's best for everybody. And part of that is, and I'm very well aware of this, not only from my former life, but as a pastor, that if you make a decision, you're going to have people that are going to disagree with you. That's just the nature of being a pastor. And I understand what you're saying. It's better probably just do it and get it. But I think also from a pastoral approach, you have to get input. Because here's the other side of the coin. I would not be doing my job efficiently if I didn't get feedback from people and get their opinion on things. Because in order to make my own decision, I don't know everything. I don't know what everyone's feeling. I don't know what everyone's thinking. I have to get all that input to kind of make in a way, calculus. Okay, most people want to do this. Okay, well that seems like what we need to do. And it's not just the majority rules. It's really just more like what would be the best thing to evangelize and actually strengthen the parish, or strengthen the archdiocese.
Yeah.
And that everyone's got an opinion about that, but it's important actually that they feel that at least they can say, I gave my opinion, and you can't say we didn't give you the opportunity to do that.
But they say I gave my opinion, but they didn't agree.
But at least you can say you were able to give your opinion, and we also took into consideration. Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Can I ask a question? Am I through the TV or is this bad audio?
No, you're through the TV.
Okay, cool. I don't know who's there, or how much, I don't know who's there, but this subject has come up in previous Father the Father and also in RCIA, and there's a couple of people, Aaron, and some other people that I've been talking to about this, about how do we evangelize, and we came up with the idea to do a St. Gabriel survey to talk about how do you come back to the church, right? We talked about those that are sending their kids to school that maybe aren't coming to the church, or those in the parish that aren't. So we were talking about a survey, and then lo and behold, last Sunday, there was the announcement that the Archdiocese is doing a survey, which is great, but now we're going to have to wait for them to do that because we're going to have to encourage responses. But is there an opportunity? I mean, we can't tack on to the tail end of that because there's a number of parishes. But is there an opportunity maybe after that to digest that information and get the data back and then do our own St. Gabriel survey?
Well, let me clarify that, Lisa. That's a good point. Yes, part of the discussion happened last week and the week before with Monsignor is that actually is going to happen from a parish standpoint too. So there's not saying that we can't do our own surveys in conjunction with the Archdiocese one too. And what you're going to see, and it's already in the works, is you're going to see surveys being sent out to individual parishes, not only from the Archdiocese, but also from St. Gabriel itself. So that is happening.
So my marketing person tells me, being in marketing, like, is that realistic to ask for survey responses from both the Archdiocese and St. Gabriel? Like, will people really understand the difference? That's part one of the question. And part two is the Archdiocese survey seems to be more about what people are doing better, how are they evangelizing, all good questions.
Yeah.
But I think the real question for St. Gabriel is, how do you bring people back?
Yeah.
Can we ask like specific questions about bringing people back and re-engaging?
So I think the answer to that is both and. So I do know the survey going out to the school. So school families are being part of not only the Archdiocese but also for our parish side. And those questions are part of those surveys. So actually, we're kind of in a way double dipping. That regardless, we're going to get the answer back either from the Archdiocese or from the parish level about why aren't you coming to Mass, what can be done better, what is keeping you from engaging the community deeper. That's more on the parish side. The Archdiocese side is okay. It's going to ask the same questions. What's keeping you from engaging your parish? What do you think would be best to evangelize better? But they're also focusing on education. They're focusing on the curia. They're focusing on the different missions and the different hospitals and ministries happening in the Archdiocese. While the survey from the parish is going to be more focused, I think, on that. Okay, what's happening that you're not coming back? And the question about is that realistic? I don't know, because here's the thing. I think regardless, the people that are really going to want to be involved are going to be involved, and the people who don't care, they're not going to answer anything. I think we're basically reaching out to people the way we've been reaching out to people through technology and flock notes and everything else. That goes a long way, and praise God. But there's still people that are not going to engage at all. And so, what can we do more to reach them? That's a good question. I don't know. But I think regardless, I'm not expecting 100% participation from St. Gabriel Parish.
Right.
I don't think
and that's where my marketing person kicks in, because the few people that I've personally surveyed have very strong opinions about things, but I don't know that they're going to take the time to fill out that survey. And even if they did, would that make a difference? There's so much conversation in the neighborhood about the music, the homily, how do we, if we really want to bring people back in our parish or at all in the Catholic faith, how do we really engage them? In marketing, I'm a business person, there'd be an incentive around that. Yeah. That doesn't work in the church. You can't give an incentive to fill out a survey, but how do you collect that information in a fashion that at least gives you what you need to think on it? Maybe you can't change it, but at least you know.
And I think part of that too is that as a leadership is taking all that into consideration and now helping making that opinion known. Because here's the thing. You're right. What we're trying to do is appeal to everybody and give everyone an opportunity. Now, whether people actually want to engage that or not, that's either way. It's going to be a personal decision. I can't show people's houses and be like, fill this out now, do it. I not only is that not right for me to do, it also would be very time consuming either way, right?
Also, you might get told.
Yeah, right. And so, your point is valid. How are we going to get all this information and actually make it relevant and actually substantial? Well, I think we just have to do the best we can and really trust that the Holy Spirit's either going to guide people or not to engage or not. And so, like I was saying, this really is more an opportunity to say, this is an actual opportunity for you to be heard. And if you choose not to be, okay, that's really on you. I can't force you to do that. No one else can force you to do that. But you're at least given the opportunity to do it. And
okay, fair enough. Yeah. That makes sense. But what about those people that live in St. Gabriel Parish and send their kids to school there, but have feelings on what's preventing them from coming to church.
Yeah, and I think that's the survey will address that. It'll ask basically it's going to be, I think, more open-ended questions like, if you are not coming, why? And it may be, well, the music. And I think, and here's the thing, I think part of this challenge, and this is where evangelization really comes into play, is helping, when you're having these conversations with people, because people don't necessarily come to me with these things. What I would say is, well, okay, is that really the reason why we should go to Mass, though, too? Is the reason we're going to Mass is to actually hear the music, or hear the homily, or even just like to socialize with friends? Those are all good things to have, and we can always do better, don't get me wrong. But I think part of the evangelization is focused on the real reason why we're there. And
fair enough.
Yeah, the real reason why
Fair
we're there
enough.
is Jesus is here. And we're there to receive
But-
him,
So I'll tell you honestly, the couple of people I've talked to live in the parish, send their kids to school there, which is opposite of me. My kid doesn't go to school there, and I still participate in the parish.
Right.
And this is a small survey feedback. They said they were bored in the homily. They wanted to hear more about your personal experiences, your personal feeling of that. And I'm a new Catholic, Father Mark.
Yeah.
I'm not judging. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
They were like, I want to go to church and and really dig into it. And they felt like St. Gabriel was too formal and too just spoke of the homily in the religious terms without any connection. And that makes me sad.
Well, I guess my response is, here's the thing. When it comes to homilies, you're not going to appeal to everybody all the time. And so what a homily is supposed to do is give a catechesis on the readings or on the particular aspect of the Mass or actually is happening on that particular season or day, right? To maybe put it in different context, when we were in the seminary talking about homiletics, the focus should be on Jesus, not on me as the preacher. If I'm using more the pronoun I more than I'm using he or Jesus or God, that's a problem.
That's big.
Yeah.
That's big because that's exactly what they were saying. Like they resonated more going to despite the fact that they live in the parish, their kids are at the school, they are going to another church.
Okay, let me ask you this though. So hold on, Lisa, let me ask you this. Is it another Catholic church?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Because here's the thing. If St. Gabriel's not your cup of tea, fine. We have literally dozens of parishes here that you can choose from, which all have a different feel, a different personality, a different approach. And so I will say, though, that for all those that maybe go somewhere else, maybe it's Joan of Arc, maybe it's Our Lady of Sorrows, whatever, we're getting people coming in from those other parishes that like what we do. And so I'm not saying we can't do better in certain aspects, but I think as long as we're going to Catholic Church, good.
Oh, that's interesting. It's majority, well, again, this is a small group, but it was mostly college church.
Yeah. Great.
And so if that resonates better with them, good.
Right. Exactly. Right? And that's what we would teach as a church. That I think, and part of this is understand, like, in St. Louis area, we've gotten so parochialized in a way that there's kind of a sense of community, obviously, with the parish church, hopefully, in a particular community. But that's one of the beautiful things about the universal church is that if you're not feeling spiritually fed here at St. Gabriel, and you maybe feel spiritually fed at the college church or at the cathedral, Good. Good. Because I will say that for everyone that maybe would be going to the college church, there may be one or two people in the college church like, you know what, I want a different feel, and St. Gabriel appeals that for me. And you know where we see that ultimately is at the 5:30 Mass on Sunday. Because the 5:30 Mass on Sunday is majority not people from this parish. So that's my...
Yeah, that's the last one in the city.
Yeah, maybe that's the reason why. I don't know. But, I mean, but what all I'm saying is, there's particular things that we can change and things really we can't. But as long as we're going to a Catholic church, I don't really care. As long as they're being fed good. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. That's a total change in the mentality of what everyone's talking about.
Which is why I think
that's where I can evangelize.
Yeah.
And anybody that said that, I'm like, great, as long as you're going to a church.
Great.
Maybe our church isn't a good fit for you. Go somewhere.
Amen. And I think that's really kind of the idea behind this All Things New campaign is, okay, where are you being fed? Where are you actually experiencing the things that you need? Because if you're experiencing
I think these people expect that if they live in the community and their kids go to school there, they want St. Gabriel to be what they want it to be.
So
that born the idea of this St. Gabriel survey of like, what are we missing?
Right.
What are we doing?
So
and
again,
maybe you'll pick up more, maybe you won't.
Well,
but as long as they're going somewhere.
Because here's my response to that, really, Lisa. It's really more, okay, well, if we do change things to really appeal to whoever these people are, how many more people are going to be losing because of that, though, too? And I haven't done the calculation. Maybe we would lose. Actually, maybe we might lose none. Maybe we'll lose all. Maybe we only have 15 people come to Mass that only, oh yeah, I like the music now, so I'll go. Well, I don't really know that. And I think that's kind of the idea behind a lot of this information, that maybe the survey will come back and say, maybe 85% of people say, yeah, the music really need to change it. Oh, okay. Well then, it looks like we might need to change it. I don't think it's going to be near that number, quite honestly. But, okay, or maybe 85% say, you know what, Father Mark's homilies are horrible. If he can just change the way he does his homilies, I'll come back. Okay. Then I'll change the way I do things. Right? But I think that's kind of the idea behind this, is that, okay, well, where are you, okay, what do you want, and are you experiencing that, and where are you experiencing it? Because if you're experiencing it and you're getting what you need, good. That gives us information to go on, and maybe you won't actually consolidate as many parishes because, hey, I'm getting something in this parish that's really good for me and good for my family, and I see other people getting it too. Now that might lead to a deeper question then, as far as, okay, well, maybe the answer is we don't close any parishes in St. Louis or don't consolidate anything. Maybe. Well, then we're still in a bind, right? Because, okay, maybe the question then becomes, how are you fostering vocations in your family? What would happen if your daughter wanted to become a nun or your son a priest? How would you support that? Or would you support that? Because here's what it basically comes down to. And people say this all the time. Ultimately, when we talk about resource, we're talking about not just the structures and the buildings and the ministries, it's really the personnel. So, okay, maybe the priest's role is just to be a sacramental minister. Now, that would be tough, but if we only have, the stat was thrown out today, right now we have 200 active priests. By 2030, 8 years, we're going to have 130. And that even may be conservative as far as the number is concerned. So, in the next 5 years,
is that St. Louis?
St. Louis.
Okay.
If in the next 5 years we're only ordaining 9 men. And we have one class that has 0 guys in the seminary. So we're going to have 1 year where we have nobody being ordained. So, we can't have sacraments without priests. And we can't have parishes without pastors. So what do we do?
Well, that's something I've wanted to ask you for a long time. Maybe not appropriate for tonight, but
why not?
you were an engineer at Boeing, and you chose this path. Why would anyone else choose this path? How do we talk about evangelizing people coming into the church? How do we evangelize people like you that are super smart that want to do this?
Well, okay, maybe I can just talk to you personally. You made it sound like it was my decision, and in a way it was, but it wasn't me. It was really God. God had the call for me, and the problem with me was I wasn't listening to the call for 15 years. It just so happened that there was people in my life that probably knew before I did what I was being called to do and interacted with me in a way that was appealing. But also, I think the deeper question there is, we're talking about evangelization of everybody outside the church. How do we evangelize in the church? And so one of the things my parents always did for me and my sisters was, when it came to our vocation or our state of life, they always said, we want you to be happy. And as long as it's moral and you're happy, I don't care what you do. I'm the only boy in my family. My parents are not going to get grandchildren from me. And part of that was they were willing to say, okay, because as long as you're happy, I don't care. And I think that really starts at home. It has to start at home. How do we evangelize our children? How do we evangelize our brothers and sisters? How do we evangelize our parents? For me, that my parents were the best source of the faith for me. And I think if I had parents that were lukewarm or lackluster in the faith, I definitely wouldn't be here now. You know, there's a stat that was thrown out, it's thrown out quite often, that when it comes to retainment of the faith, it's like 95% of people will actually practice their faith if their fathers were active in their faith. And my dad was pretty active in his faith. He went to Mass every day. He would, I mean, in our younger years, he went to Mass. It didn't matter. If you were dying, fine. But otherwise, you're going to Mass. And you better pay attention. It got to the point when I was like in my teens, my dad would ask me, it was no longer enough to bring home a bulletin. It's like, what was the gospel? What was the homily about? Ugh. But what it showed was that it was important to him. It was important to him, it should be important to me.
What happened when it wasn't important to you?
Well,
You saw that. I'm pretty sure you saw that at RCIA last week. What happens when it's not important to the child and it's important to you?
Well, I think so a lot of that comes out of the mode of the receiver. And here's the thing about it, for me personally. I can't speak on anybody else, Lisa. But for me personally, I always went to Mass. In college, I went to Mass every Sunday. When I was alone, working alone, I would go to Mass every Sunday. There was not a time I wasn't going to Mass. Now, there were times where I wouldn't necessarily bring that grace to the rest of my week. I wouldn't necessarily invite Jesus into my work, in my personal life, but doggone it, I was going to Mass every Sunday no matter what. And maybe if I didn't want to go, I still went because that was important. And so that was my parents, that was my dad, my mom, reflecting in my formation as a child. And there were times when I was a teenager in grade school, in 7th, 8th grade, I didn't want to go to Mass all the time, sure. But if I didn't, I better have a really good reason not to.
What if you went and fell asleep?
Well,
you saw that.
So,
you saw that
yeah.
last
Well,
week.
I mean, if that happens, then at least I went. I still did what I could. And okay, my dad may get upset that I fell asleep. That maybe didn't remember the homily, but I was there. I got witnesses. You can call up the Stropmans or the Cressmans, and they saw me. And even if I fell asleep, I understood. I mean, now I understood, and even then I kind of had an understanding that there's still grace given by the fact that I was there. And this, you do this on reflection. I mean, I didn't really realize this as I was a little older, but I noticed that when I went to Mass and really engaged with it, my week was easier. My obligations became a little less stressful. I was a little less burdened. But I wouldn't have done that unless my parents were instrumental in that. And so I say that immediately so that I think when it comes to your situation, keep on taking him. Keep on bringing him. And he may hiss a fit every time. He may get ticked off. But in the long run, it's going to pay dividends.
Awesome advice. I don't know who's there right now or if this is relevant, so we can table this if needed. But I'm still interested in, we're talking about evangelizing people, but we're not talking about evangelizing priests.
Well, I think we're talking about evangelizing everybody. And so, here's the struggle.
Is that two different things?
No.
Because evangelizing people is go to church and do your thing.
Right.
But evangelizing somebody like you that says, I was an engineer at Boeing and this is now my calling, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
So, okay, well, I don't need that because I'm already there. But I think when it comes to priests, where the evangelization applies to them is, here's I think one of the struggles I have not seen as much with this conversation with All Things New. And I think it needs to kind of start with this. When we talk about evangelization, we really also need to talk about orthodoxy. We need to talk about actually teaching the truths of the faith. And unfortunately, there's some brother priests of mine who don't maybe necessarily hold the truths of the faith. At least not all of them. And they're kind of akin to what we call Cafeteria Catholics, right? They choose what they want to believe and may reject some other things they don't want to believe. Priests are no different. And it hurts to say that, but I know some of my brother priests are good men. They are good men, but they don't necessarily teach the faith truthfully. Or even celebrate the sacraments in a good way. Now, the lady... So
how do you call that apostolic faith then, right?
Well,
I'm learning apostolic faith, but there's digressions, right?
So as I'm saying, the apostolic faith is a faith that's handed down by the apostles from Jesus himself. So we have to make a distinction here. The truths of the faith are true, objectively. What the church teaches as a whole is true. Because of my weak personhood, because of my fallen nature, because of some of my brother's fallen nature, we don't do that perfectly. And so it's important, I think, too, to recognize, and this is what got the church in trouble, all the time, is people put their faith in a person and not the right person. So in other words, if you're putting your faith in Father Mark, you're going to fall. You're going to be cruising for a bruising. You may even lose your faith if you put your faith in Father Mark. So don't put your faith in Father Mark. Put your faith in the truths of Jesus and the truths of the church. If you do
That's huge. That's a huge lesson.
Yeah.
Because we have relationships with, our best relationships have been with you and Father Chris and Father Ryan and Father Steve, who left
Yeah.
the church. I think that might be
Whoa,
something
whoa,
that.
whoa, whoa. Nobody left
What?
the church. What are you talking about? No. Nobody left the church.
No, I'm sorry. Bad.
They moved. They moved on to somewhere else. Yeah, right. Okay, good. All right.
They moved
Yes.
somewhere else. But
So,
like,
yeah.
the relationships with you are relationships with the parish.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and that's good. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, the relationships are good. I'm not saying don't have any relationships with the priests.
so we have to stop seeing it as a person.
Well, yeah, exactly. What you have to say is,
Classic.
if you put me on a pedestal, I'm going to leave you unfulfilled. I am not Jesus. I am not God. I can't give you the salvation that Jesus gave you on the cross. I can't do that. And that is how a lot of priests got in trouble in the past, because people put them on the pedestal. And there was no accountability in that. And let's be very clear. I would never willfully hurt anybody. I would never do that. I would rather die than do that. But that doesn't mean I can't unwillfully hurt someone.
Human.
Yeah.
Human.
Right. I am.
Mm.
I only understand the person of Jesus Christ in two scenarios: when the Eucharist is being confected, and when he's absolving somebody's sins. That's it. Otherwise, I'm just Father Mark.
Oh. That's big.
Yeah.
That's we have to digest that.
Yes.
That's big.
As we should. But I think that kind of answers a lot of questions. I think, again, there's that line between, look, I love going to people's houses, being invited to dinner. I love hanging out with people. That's awesome. But don't ask me to babysit. Or, because that's the thing, I can, first off. But that's the thing, we have to understand that, that when we put people on pedestals, they're going to leave you unfulfilled, no matter who they are, including me, Monsignor Shamleffer. Monsignor, we're going to do that because we're not God.
You're human.
We're human. And like I said, when I'm standing at the altar confecting the Eucharist, that's not Father Mark, it's Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But once that's done, it's Father Mark. When you come to the confessional to receive absolution, that's Jesus. But after you receive absolution, that's again Father Mark. When you're in the hospital and you get anointed, that's Jesus. But otherwise, it's Father Mark.
I'm a new Catholic, but do you think everybody gets that? Like, I look at you and Father Chris, Father Ryan, Father Steve, even Monsignor, like, I'm a new Catholic, so I'm sorry for whoever's in the room, but I don't think I differentiate that. I have a relationship with you.
Yeah, and
I don't see you as Jesus when I talk to you.
And you shouldn't.
Is that?
Yeah, you're right. No, you're absolutely right. You shouldn't. Right? Because now, hopefully, I am bringing Jesus to you. I am bringing that presence to you that you can see Jesus through me. But I'm not Jesus. Right? And because here's the thing. This is the way the church works. I'm not going to be here forever. And so if you're putting your faith on what I do or a relationship with me, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but I don't know if I'm the only person that thinks this,
No,
but
you're not.
I think I look to you as that person. I think I don't differentiate.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. I mean, there's appeal. I think, like when it comes to relationship, obviously there's something that would be appealing to someone else. Otherwise, you wouldn't want to spend time with them. But that shouldn't be because I'm a priest, or it should be human, right? And maybe we have a good match in personality, or maybe we have good conversations. Nothing wrong with that at all. But I think also too we have to be very cognizant that that's Father Mark. Maybe I appeal to Father Mark, but maybe when Father Mark leaves, well, does that mean that I'm not going to come to Mass anymore, or not going to engage maybe with the priest anymore, not going to engage in the parish anymore? Well, if that's the case, then that's a problem. I don't want that, right? And so, I mean, in certain ways too, like when it comes to things like spiritual direction, or sometimes priests counsel certain people on certain things, right? And so one thing that the priest always has to be cognizant of is how are their own dispositions or biases, or how are they maybe getting in the way of the Holy Spirit working for the betterment of that person? And to a certain degree, what are my own feelings in this conversation, in this relationship? Should I even be a part of this? Because what happens sometimes too, especially with, I think it maybe happened with younger priests or something. I don't know. Maybe not even younger priests, but like let's say, for instance, I am a spiritual director for someone I may have an attraction towards. If that's the case, I should transfer that person to somebody else. I should not keep that engagement. Because maybe I might help them, maybe. But if that's causing a detriment to that person and to me, that's bad. And so for the best thing for them and for me, I would then maybe give them to somebody else. And say, why don't you go talk to Father so-and-so? He'll be able to help you very well. Part of that is self-awareness. I have to be aware of my own proclivities, my own issues.
That's what happened in the 70s.
Yeah.
Got a lot of priests in trouble.
It did.
And they were only trying to do their job. Because before that, priests used to go to people's houses. Mm-hmm. They used to visit. I mean, I've been a Catholic all my life. Mm-hmm. And priests were part of your family. And then all of a sudden, it became, they do this and they do that. Mm-hmm. You could take anything out of context. And all of a sudden, it just exploded and everybody was thinking priests were this and this and that. I said, you don't even know it.
Right.
But
yeah, part of that's protecting yourself, but also protecting the other people.
Right.
And so like it's one of these things where I've told this story before, but shortly after I was ordained, I was over at my parents' house before they moved in the parish, and my nieces were over there with my dad, and we were sitting in the living room. My dad got up for a minute and he walked out of the room, and about 15 minutes later he came through the front door, and I said, "Where'd you go?" He said, "Well, I went to go get a paper." I'm like, "You can never do that to me again." He said, "What are you talking about?"
Leaving you in a bad
I can't be left alone with these two girls.
Yeah, somebody passed and they...
You're right. Well, not only that, but let's say, and I know this would, here's the thing, I know this would never happen, but you have to be cognizant of these things. Let's say my brother-in-law decides to leave my sister. All he has to say is, well, he touched them.
Yeah.
And he gets full custody.
Yeah.
And I can't defend myself because there's no one else there.
Right.
To witness. So that's the things we have to think about.
We're in an evil society right now.
Right.
That people are blowing things out of proportion and everything else. It's just terrible.
Yeah, it is horrible. I think obviously
because I'll bet my money of the priests that were accused of these things, it was false.
So I think if you look at what they call the substantial and the credible. So the way they look at these things is there's credible, there's substantial, and then there's conviction, right? Mm-hmm. So credible is really, I think a lot of people fall in that category. It's like, so maybe we had Father Joseph Jang, we had maybe Father Rochelle, some people in the Archdiocese who were kind of accused, and the question is, well, is it credible? Meaning, was it possible for it to happen? And for I think many priests who are accused, that's where they fall.
Yep.
I put myself in a situation I probably shouldn't have, and even though it was innocent, nothing happened. Well, I don't really have a defense because it could have happened. Then there's things like substantial, which is really more heinous. That's really like, no, there's a very high probability that this actually did occur. And here we actually have evidence to show that.
Well, some of these priests, like Father Rothschild, that was out in the wide open. That lady was after him forever.
Right.
And she was bound and determined. She still is.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons he didn't end up out in Oakville.
Well,
because those people were up in arms.
Right, and that's one of the sad things about these situations
Right.
because even though nothing happened, just the accusation follows you around.
Right.
And so even the fact that you get, so that's what the cognizant is I don't want to put myself in a situation where I can be accused.
Nope.
That's the line,
Yep.
right? So whenever there are young people around, I make sure there's another adult.
Yep.
Always.
You have to.
Right.
Because priests are in a bad situation.
That's right.
They just don't, I mean, I hear so many people say, well, that's why the Catholic religion is crappy. And I says, you know what? You don't know anything about it. I says, the thing about Catholic Church, which I've always loved, is you can get up and go and walk out if you don't like priests that say the Mass. I said, you just go anywhere else. I says, and there's plenty places out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's why for 21 years, we had a 4 o'clock club, which was a Mass at St. Alexis. And Father Damien Doherty, I'm sure you know him.
I don't know.
Because he was one of the people that taught you classes online from the Archdiocesan.
Oh, like Paul VI, or
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we know.
He worked well, but he would tell us about things that Jesus done, and he would put it in such a way that went in with his normal life, which made it,
Yeah.
kept us interested.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So we were back there every week.
Right.
And then, but I seen things in like I said, that people accuse people of stuff, and they don't, a lot of it is just jealousy.
Yeah.
Because I've always found, when we were little, my dad was an alcoholic, and my mother, we lived 14 blocks from church. We lived on Forest Avenue where the standard sign is. We used to walk up to St. Luke's because that was our parish. We would walk up in the middle of the night. In those days, they had the church open all night long. And my mother would say a rosary, and then we'd walk out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way we were raised.
Yeah. Yeah.
My grandma came from Italy,
Mm-hmm.
and St. Ambrose was her church
Mm-hmm.
that we went to every Sunday because my grandma lived across the street from church. So, but I mean, we were raised that
Yeah.
if you want any kind of thing, you go to church.
Right. Yeah, right. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, it used to be the church was the center of the community.
Right.
Right. And I think over time, for whatever reasons, I mean, that tends to change. And so, like, it's interesting now. Like, I experienced this in Immaculate Heart, a little bit at St. James, that when the school was getting ready to close, the reason there was such emotion and such anger and such frustration is because the thought was, well, the school is the center of the community.
Mm-hmm.
We send our kids there, we are engaged with the school, but maybe not so much with the parish and the church. And so I think to the point you're making, Lisa, with a lot of these people that are sending their kids to the school, they're looking at the school as the center of the community because, well, yeah, it's a big ministry, sure. But if we don't have the Eucharist and don't have a thriving community in the church, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. It was Sherry Massman that enlightened me on that. I kept thinking, okay, I sent my kid here because it's part of a good parish, but really it's the parish that should drive the school.
Absolutely.
And Sherry Massman, you know her.
Yep.
She has a million ideas on
Right.
how to make that happen,
Yep.
but is that really realistic? I mean, I don't know. Let's see what the survey
Yeah.
brings in.
And I think also the survey is just one tool. I mean, there's going to be other. I think the listening session are going to be very important too. That you can actually voice these things. Like, so Sherry can come and say, I have these ideas. And I think that's a good thing. But also, I mean, it doesn't have to get to that point. Just making appointments with Monsignor Schamlifer to give them to him directly would be good. So I think that's the thing. I think there's been a shift in the parochial understanding of what actually is happening. And I think we experience that at St. Gabriel in a way, but I think every parish that has a school is experienced in some way. That parents that send their kids to the school, they're focused more on the school than they are actually on the parish.
But it takes the school money to fuel the parish. like you
Well,
saw
hold
St.
on.
Mark's on.
Actually, let me stop you right there.
Wait, is that reversed?
It's reversed.
It's reversed.
Oftentimes, this parish is subsidizing the cost of the school, and that's true here for St. Gabriel too. And it's not an insignificant.
But I think originally the intent was, if you had the school, the parish.
Well, let me put it this way.
That didn't happen.
So,
right?
so according to the Third Council of Baltimore, which happened in the 1800s, parochial school is supposed to be free. That was the intention of parochial school, was to be free. Now, the reason it could be free is because you had orders and nuns and priests teaching in the school.
Mm.
So you didn't have to pay because, well, they're already taken care of. Now, over time, many of those vocations, people blame Vatican II, maybe. I think there's other factors, but either way, vocations tailed off to the point where you didn't have religious and priests in the school anymore.
No.
You had lay people who had families. And because they had families and had to provide for their families, they needed a just wage. And so then it was like, well, now we have to pay tuition because we have to pay our teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where we are today.
So is this a factor of we need to evolve as a parish or as a
Well, I think
religion?
I think, and here's the thing. I want to credit people like Miss McHenry, like Dr. Winkler, the teachers. I think there is an understanding that wall needs to come down between the parish and the school. But practically speaking, doing that is really a battle of heart and mind, rather than actually like a practical program. So what I mean by that is, we can put engagement with the parish all we want with the school. We can have these different drives and different like interactions and everything else. But unless parents and people that engage in the school change their heart and their mind to actually say, well, I really should start bringing my kids to Mass. I really start engaging more in the parish. That divide's always going to be there, no matter who's there or what we do. And that was an enlightening moment for me when Sherry Massman, and I'm sure you're talking to her, but had ideas on how do we bring the parish back to the school? Yeah, and
the parish should drive, the church should drive the school.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. I mean, and in ways it does. But, I think part of the problem we have right now is even our parents have fallen away from catechetical instruction to understand the importance of these things. And so it's always been taught by the church that the first teachers of the faith are always the parents. My job is not to teach your children. My job is to help you teach your children. But if you don't want that help or don't want to engage in that way, I, again, can't force you. I can maybe talk to your kids about the importance of going to Mass. I can talk to your kids about the importance of the sacraments, which I try to do. And maybe in some ways, a lot of times what we're seeing now is sometimes the kids are evangelizing the parents.
Yeah.
But
definitely it's evangelizing the parents.
Yeah.
And kudos to you. I've already heard from 3 different parents in the 7th grade of what you're trying to do.
Oh, good.
It is recognized.
What am I trying to do?
I don't know. We don't go to school there
Fair
anymore.
Fair
but
enough.
It was recognized.
Okay, praise God.
And you were trying.
Praise God. Praise God. Do you have something?
I was just going to say along that same lines is when you're saying this person, doesn't like the music or doesn't like the homily, it's the same bit of evangelizing. What have you done to, participate? What homework have you done before coming to church?
Yeah.
To be in the mindset of, instead of getting from, is giving to.
Right.
During that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it's also goes into the understanding of what the role of the laity is at the Mass.
Right.
Because the role of the laity, I think this is also missed too by a lot of people. I know we actually talked about this RCA, I know, but the role of the laity in their baptismal office is to offer the sacrifice too. That's their main job. Their main role in the liturgy is to actually offer spiritual sacrifice. And so to that same point, well, I didn't get anything out of the music or the homily.
Exactly.
Okay, well, what'd you offer in your spiritual sacrifice in the Mass? What?
And that's not taught at all.
Right.
It's
Right.
coming to a concert instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can go to a concert anywhere.
Right.
And I think that's something that's missed too. And that's what comes down to when we talk about teaching orthodoxy. And that's something that's being very, I don't know, I mean, maybe the plan is to kind of develop that, but whatever. I have not heard anything in this program about when it comes to evangelization, how are we actually evangelizing in orthodox ways, teaching the truth. Because if we do that, I think here's this dirty little secret. I mean, so it was mentioned at one of these meetings that it was observed that one of the problems with one of the prior programs we had in the Archdiocese, I think it was Catholics Come Home, that one of the problems that they experienced was they did all this research, did all this study, and put everything together to bring Catholics into the church, like come back to the church, and then the people that came left because they realized why they left in the first place. Now, what was presented was the reason why people were leaving was because we are not as hospitable as we can be in welcoming people back. And maybe that's true. I mean, I know that here at St. Gabriel gets hit pretty well about hospitality and like welcoming people, and I don't know. I mean, I think for the most part the people that come to Mass are pretty hospitable, pretty welcoming, at least what I've seen. But I don't know. But I guess my point would be though, well, okay, but I think if we're actually teaching the truth and showing people the truth, that's more appealing than, oh, hey, why do we have donuts after Mass? No, how are you? What's your name? And yeah, we can do both, I agree, but I think it's much more evangelizing to say, here's, Jesus loves you, and here's what he wants for you, and here's actually how you can be happy in this life.
That should be it.
Right.
It's just unbelievable the way they do things nowadays. I mean, anytime they say anything about kids and sex or something happening, they always talk about the priest first. My husband says, why don't they ever say anything about the public school teachers?
Yeah.
He says, they cover everything up.
There's more pedophiles in the public school system than in the Catholic Church.
There is.
Yeah.
But they always target the priest. And then
it's not as documented as
Right.
Yeah. And it won't be.
In a way, it shows the credibility and the actual transparency of the church.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I think I think it's part of this is a recognition that the church doesn't teach us a good thing, right? But again, people are fallen, and people are sick, and they need help.
And I always say that they need to start singing the church. The church needs to go back to singing about the Blessed Mother.
Yep. Yeah.
The songs were always about the Blessed Mother.
Yeah, no, I think there's.
You don't even see a song about the Blessed Mother.
I think there's truth. I mean, again, that kind of goes back to orthodoxy. Like, how are we actually presenting?
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. So I think it's again, it's Jesus loves. Here's how he loves you.
Right.
And here's what he wants for you, and this is how you can actually change the happiness.
And also, going back to, you go to Mass every day when you're in Catholic school. No matter what.
I've.
And I know it's tough, but you need to go to Mass.
I think we were on that. I think we were projecting that way until COVID kind of screwed everything up, and hopefully, hopefully we're seeing the end here, and maybe we can start getting back to that path. But yeah, I think there's something to be said about that too.
Because repetition. If you learn to go to church every day, I mean the nuns, they were there. You had to be in church.
Yeah.
And you didn't act up in church,
right?
Because they'd nail you every time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot there.
And I loved it. I mean, it was something about going to church. I mean, one time I was afraid of the nun, so I ended up sitting in the back of church after lunch, and everybody was looking for me. But that was my safe spot.
Yeah.
You know, that's how you relate.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know that's another thing too. I know that in the past when there were actually nuns in the school, they would keep tabs on that for Sunday.
Yeah.
And they would see who was in their class, show up for Sunday Mass, and they would then report back, and they would even ask you on Monday why you weren't there.
Yeah.
And you know, now even getting our teachers to get to Mass is kind of a struggle.
Really?
Here's the thing. I always assume charitably. So I'm not saying they're not going to Mass, but I know we have several teachers who are parishioners here at St. Gabriel, and I very rarely see them at Sunday Mass. So again, they may be going somewhere else. I'm not saying they're not. I'm assuming they are.
Are they gonna get the survey?
Yes. Everybody's getting a survey.
Well, Queen of All Saints had a problem with the kids going to church.
Mm-hmm.
And my son and my daughter-in-law, they took their kids to church every Sunday, except now they're in sports. And that screws up the whole thing.
Yes, the god of basketball, volleyball, soccer,
you know,
baseball, yes.
I'm thinking, why is sports more important than Jesus?
Yeah. And you know, the argument I hear a lot of times with that is, well, you know, they're a member of a team. They have an obligation to the team. It's like, sure they do. But you can't find in St. Louis a Mass at some point of the day where you're not doing something with sports. I find that hard to believe. And maybe there is legitimate, like, hey, we're out of time, we know where Masses are. Okay, there's this app called, Find My Mass Times. Try that. So in other words, I think that's the problem, is that there's not, and here's the thing, before the invention of the internet, there was dispensations given if you were out of town, right? Typically, and even today there still are. If you go to the pastor and say, you know what, Father, we're going on a cruise, I don't think there's going to be a chaplain there. We're going to be on a boat for 8 days. Can I get a dispensation? Sure, right? And it used to be like before the internet. There used to be like, okay, well, if you're going on vacation, you don't know where the masses are, you don't know where the churches are, you don't know what the church times are. Okay, sure.
We have Channel 11.
Well,
at 8:30.
but again, before the internet was invented, that was a reasonable excuse. Now you can't necessarily make that excuse because there's so many ways to find information at the palm of our hand.
Even in those days, though, we had Channel 2 that had Mass every Sunday.
Well, but what I'm saying is, even that would be okay. Well, why? Okay, that would be okay based on the circumstance. Let's say if you were sick or something. Okay, but just turn on Channel 2, and now we're in kind of a period where people are preferring to watch Mass at home on the internet than actually come in person, and that's causing another problem because, well, okay, are you homebound, or can you not go to Mass? Oh no, I just like to have my coffee. Yeah, see, that's not part of the obligation.
Yep.
And then we're talking about that's what's evangelized, right? In ways that's made it harder in COVID to be like, well, I'm used to this now. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Well, I need to go.
Yeah, no, it's 8 o'clock. Good discussion. Thanks, guys, for coming.
Yeah.
So next week, I believe, is the first of the month. So we'll have Friends, Food, and Faith. And I think we're going to have a discussion on liturgical music. So we'll talk about why the church says what is proper and what's not, and reasons why we choose particular music for liturgy and why we reject some others. So that might be a heated topic. We'll have to see. I don't know.
As long as you get back to the Blessed Mother.
What was that?
As long as you get back to the Blessed Mother.
Amen.
I mean, I don't even like the new songs.